Good morning and welcome to day two. Sometimes it feels like this week is longer, like we've been doing this for like 3 days. In reality, it's just the second day. So, yesterday we learned how important it is to care about security and our passwords and little subtle ways that we can help our users have better passwords. But we also learned that actually the best solution is to not even deal with passwords. So, if we can have someone else do that, it will be better in the long run. But we're still learning how to do it, just in case, right? And we learned that hashing is better than encrypting, and there are some libraries that are going to help us with that. So one thing that remains, though, is if we go and log in now, but then later we go into another. Let's say that we wanted to check whether the user is logged in or not, and we go into our login. Okay, so if I come here, log in, excellent. Welcome, Jonathan. Jonathan is logged in, and then we could go to users, do a send, right? And we see the list of users. We should probably remove the passwords because over there. But how are we really doing that? I mean, there is no way for the server to know across requests. The reason we can see that is because right now we only have this function and it's not checking that the user is logged in. But I will ask you, if I want to restrict this to only if the device is logged in, will they be able to see that? How can we do that? And the answer would be, I don't know, Luis, because there's nothing that I could take away from somewhere that is going to tell me that. I mean, how can I know, right? So that's one of the things that we're going to tackle today. Of course, the conversation we're going to have is about sessions and cookies in the context of authentication. But it's important to understand that the problem that sessions and cookies solve is not, I'm sorry about my chair, it's kind of creaking here. The problem that cookies and sessions solve is not that of authentication per se. It's just a way to kind of provide browsers or clients the illusion that they have shared state with the server. Because HTTP, the protocol of the web, happens to be stateless. So when you go and make a request, and the server finishes with a request and send you a response, it forgot about you already. So on the next request, you have to reestablish identity if you wanted to tell the server who you are, because there is no state that is kept across requests, right? Let me see if I can lower the subtle creak on the chair. All right, still there. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna see how we can use sessions and cookies to kind of keep state alive between requests, across requests. Now, before we start with today's lesson, remember the project for yesterday. Hopefully, we got at least to the first part, right? So that we could move into the second portion of this, which is, am I looking at the right project? Yes. Okay. So hopefully we can move on into the portion that has to do with keeping the users, like this portion right here, where we keep the users logged in across requests, okay? That's the missing piece that we have right now. We're gonna create some kind of middleware to check that the user is logged in before we let them go ahead and see the users, okay? You probably already did the part that was due for Monday, so some of you probably working on the Tuesday part. So this is where we're gonna use sessions and cookies. Before we start though, I want you to notice something. Shift Command T will reopen that window. Shift Command T on the Mac, Shift Control T, I think, on Windows. You will notice something. If I go here into the branches, oh, look at that. How many branches do we have? Only one, right? Only master. Is there something missing from there? No answer. Okay, so there is a questions thread that I missed. Okay, here. Cool. So nothing's missing, so we're good to go on those repositories on the back end? Okay. Well, Michael didn't see anything missing, but in truth, prior repositories, I remember when I used to work across the board, like, doing the React Weeks and all that. We always had solutions there. You would see things like Ryan always created its own solutions as Ryan's solution. Whereas, like, I mean, unless you want to provide a solutions branch, yeah, there's supposed to be a solution there. But I've been doing this here for years, so I noticed a pattern, and I'm going to tell you the reasoning why there are no solutions. At least not there are no Louis solution. I think when Ryan taught a few days on this cohort, he actually created a solution branch again. I I kind of removed the solutions. I mean, it's not like they're not there. I just removed them. Um, there's a history, and they were there. Of course, the project mutated also, so the old solutions that we had, they're not applying to the project anymore. So we would need to like build model solutions again for all of those projects. But I noticed a pattern, right? So someone at 3:30 in the afternoon, or well, that would be my time. So let's say someone at supposed to have lunch 11 to 12. Someone at 1:30 or 2 will start sending me a message. Not every, you have a group of 50 students and you only get 10 of those, you're fine, right? But there are 10 of those, or 5, or even if it's only one, an hour after they start working on the project, they're asking me about how does this work on the solution branch. So by that time, I expect that they are trying to understand what the problem is, doing any research that they need, and wiring up the project. But what they're looking at is at the end product and trying to understand code that someone else wrote. And that's not the intention of the projects. The intention of the projects in the afternoon is that you give it your best to go and do that using or referencing only your code and any documentation that you could find on the web. It's not going into the pull requests on the project to see what other students did, or looking at what the instructor left you there as a reference solution. And it's always going to be a simplified reference solution, as simple as we can make them, so that you don't have a hard time understanding it. But when you see a pattern of students defaulting to first going and see the solution to try and understand that and copy it, then I think we're missing the point, right? And it will not benefit you if you find that there. But I have gotten feedback in this group that there is a little bit of we miss the solutions. We want to have them there. So I'm reconsidering and sitting down and kind of building the solutions for the new content of the projects again, and just publishing there and have it on a branch. So if you don't see them there yet, it's because I haven't started doing that. But I will start doing that, so that you don't feel like, hey, they used to give a solution and now they don't. But I want you to understand what the reasoning behind that was, because this is like, it's like, we don't want to give you a solution for the sprint challenge, because it's a way for you to try this stuff out, to try and figure it out. And that's where the learning happens. Reading code, watching me do it, it's so that you could have a chance to ask your questions and try to understand the high level concepts. But it's not until you sit down and put fingers to the keyboard that you actually start getting the aha moments. Because I cannot teach you anything. You have to learn it. And everyone learns with a different style. I love videos. I love seeing someone walk me through a solution, not dropping a piece of code. Whenever I'm watching a video, training video, and someone comes in and take copy and paste and drops slabs of code on the screen, I close the video right away because I'm not going to learn. Personally, I learn by going step by step. So if I know exactly how the code, you're going to see me do this a lot. And if you go back to all of the videos and the time that we've been together, you're going to see that I do that a lot. Where I know that I'm going to need a constant to reach something. But if we're learning, let's say, using bcrypt, instead of me declaring all the stuff that I needed beforehand and then just adding that line of bcrypt because I knew it, what I do is I say, yeah, we need bcrypt, and we're going to tell bcrypt this, and that. Oh, by the way, we need this. We need to create this other variable. Then we go up and insert that so that you see the origin of everything. This is why I insist that, please, don't try to follow along, because if you follow along, you miss those little subtle things. And then you're asking me, where did that come from? What do you do to do this? What do you do to do that? Well, you were heads down trying to follow along while I'm doing that little crucial piece of, code and the explanation for it. And you're missing out on the content. And we don't want you missing out on the content. We want you to take advantage of the time together. To see how things flow, where did this come from? How did he get to where he is now? Okay. So there will be solutions. So don't worry about it. Oh, and by the way, if someone is to blame, it's me. I decided to remember the solution. It's not the PMs. They didn't know about it. They were as surprised as you were when they came in. I was like, Luis, there's no solutions there. I was like, I hope that you know this. And if not, be on the lectures because we're going to discuss it. But they're going to be there. So this is a long way for me to say, I'm sorry, I apologize for not having the solutions for you, and I'll do my best to have them there. Hope you accept the apologies. All right, so let's go back to today. Shouldn't there only be a solution at the end after we finish? It's hard. Like that would mean that for every project we have to. The student that wants to find it will eventually find it. Go to the forks and look at somebody else's code and somebody else's pull request. It was just a way to kind of make it a little harder. It's like having the club on the steering wheels of the cars. We know that if someone wants to steal that Jaguar, they're gonna break through that club and just take it anyways. But if someone is just looking for a quick ride and they see 3 cars and one of them doesn't have the club, guess what? They're going to go through that one first, because it's human nature to go with the path of least resistance. So we avoid it. If you know that you're weak with chocolate and it's hurting you, don't have chocolate at home because you will eat it, path of least resistance. So protect yourself. I was wrong to do that though, so I'm sorry. Okay, so let the hacking begin. So here, who said that? Kevin's like, let the hacking begin. Stop it, Luis, go. I see good ideas coming up in there. We'll figure them out. All right, so let the hacking begin, right? The idea is, for today, we want to have a way to share state across the client and the servers and across requests. And we're going to use sessions for that. And there's some information on how, the workflow and how it works and about how the cookies work. You can read through those later. Don't worry about them. You don't have to understand the mechanics. You just need to understand the tooling, because the tooling are going to take care of that. At a really basic level, an HTTP message, the stuff that goes between the client and the server, at a basic level has 2 pieces, the header and the body. And then they're both kind of, you can think of them as a hash, like an object, a JavaScript object. So the header is going to have a key value pair, and you can put information in there and you can read information from there. Same with the body. We know how to use the body already. So in the case of sessions, what happens is the libraries that we're going to use, the tooling, they're going to stick a header, like a key on that object. And the value of that key, the value of that property on that object is gonna contain enough information so that when the client sends another request, the server can read that information from that header. So that it's going to be sent back and forth, right? The server is going to send it, and then the browser automatically is going to attach that header to the next request. And I'll show you what that is. It's what you have seen that a lot because of the new laws where people just can't set cookies without asking you or letting you know. So that device, that way of transferring that data, it's called a cookie, a cookies. It's a cookie. No, it's a typo. I was looking for that typo and I forgot what it was. There it is. So cookies. So what we'll do is we're going to use something called Express Session. And that by default is going to use cookies for the session management as a way to store the data, not to manage it because it's going to manage it depending on what we do, but this is how it's going to be sent back and forward. It's going to be sent as a cookie that it's going to go in the response, and then the browser is going to send back that cookie on every request. So we'll see it in action in a minute. I'll mention all of this stuff that's here as we go through the exercise. So let's go and implement it after I take a quick look at all the questions there. Some are related to the conversation about the solutions, and then let's see if there's anything else. Chocolate chip cookies, philosophy. Someone asking me what medication. I'm taking Dayquil. It's just kind of not inspired because of that. Hey, nice Cookie Monster. All right, so let's implement that. I'm gonna continue working on the same auth mini that I've been working. This is gonna go through the week, including the part about JSON Web Tokens. And let's go and do a login because we already have that register done, right? And when we register, we're just hashing that, creating the user, and then we're not sending anything back. So we're gonna start at the login first because we already have users. So we're gonna use one of those users to do our login. Now, the idea here is when I come back to this endpoint on the users, I need to check if the device is logged in. And there are different ways that we could do that. For our purpose, since we know that we're going to be using sessions, I'm going to make a check. I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say, hey, do I have, as part of my request, remember that any prior middleware or endpoint, which is middleware, by the way, can add information to the request and the response. But normally for things like this, when you're trying to save information that the rest of your route handlers or the rest of your middleware are going to use, we tend to use the request. Okay, so I'm going to say, do I have a session on the request? And if I do have a session, I'm going to check for a particular piece of information in there, and that's going to tell me that the user is logged in. Oh, we could choose anything here, right? But I'm going to make it as, in this scenario, I'm going to say, if I have a username there, this could be a whole user object. But in our case, our user has a username and password, so there's only actually the username. So I'm going to say, if I have inside of that session a username, that means that the user is logged in. Doesn't mean they have access to this, but it means that it's logged in. Okay? And if that's not the case, and if they're not there, then I'm going to say, hey, you're not logged in. So I'm going to send you a status of 401, which is you're not authorized, right? We're not authorized. Let's do that. Let's not authorize. You have no power over this. Now, if you are, though, this is where we're going to take this and put it up there. That's the code that I want to have. Only I don't want to have it here. Of course, we're going to have it here first. But this is something that should be probably on a piece of middleware there. Your exercise is moving this to a piece of middleware. Doing something like this, but on a middleware. Okay. So now I'm checking. The problem is that I have no request a session and I have no username. So this is going to actually, if we hit that endpoint now, it's going to give us an error. Any guesses as to what the error is? So if I go in here and hit the user's endpoint, Boom, not authorized, but it actually failed. It should have failed at least, because I don't have any wiring for this. Oh yeah, it did not fail because of the first check, because of this check. Let me show you the error that I'm in. So if I save that and I do this, looking for the username on the session, that should fail. But I inadvertently protected myself. So this is saying cannot read property username of undefined. So it's looking for a username and something that is undefined. And it's true because the recta session doesn't even exist. So we need to have that so that we can check the username. I do this by default, that I protect myself, like, let me check if there's a session before I check for the username. So this is why we didn't get the error. But you saw that it jumped into the 4.1. Yeah, you're not authenticated. So the question is, how do we get that session? How do we come up with having that session? And the answer is a library. You're going to use a library. It's called Express Session. So let's go find it. It should be probably Express Session. Well, we have this. We want to take a quick look at that. And here we go. So there's a couple of options there. We're going to pick the one called Express Sessions. Express Session on NPM. It's fairly, 500,000 downloads a week. It's fairly, it's been around for a while. I don't know if, what does it say? How long has it been around? I thought it was there. The last publish was a year ago. It's kind of stable. So, but it's been around for a while. And you could see, if you go check on the different session stores that you have for this library, this is all the stuff that supports this library for saving your sessions in a database or some kind of external store. By default, it's going to be in memory. So when you're looking for a library, you want to see things like that. You want to see that it's well supported by a lot of other packages that use it or complement it. Like in this case, it adds extra functionality. So we're going to basically follow the instructions here to configure Express sessions in an Express session in our project. So let's go do that. Let's go back here and say, well, we need the package for sure. Just going to add that. So clicking this button, open another terminal. I'm going to say yarn add Express session. And then once that's done, we're going to go up there and configure that. And bring in the library. I think it's probably done. Let's assume that it's done. So I'm going to say rem. This. I'm going to call this session. It's going to be equal to require Express session. Okay. And then once we do that, let's move this. This is what we added just now. Oh, my keyboard, man. There's a library, and then we're gonna configure that. Anywhere after the Express application has been built, you could configure. It's gonna be middleware, right? So this is how this works. I'm gonna say, hey, Express, I want you to use the Express session middleware, but we call the session up there with triple S. Session. There you go. But this is gonna need some kind of configuration. So we're gonna call this session config, okay? And then we're gonna write it up here, const session config. Instead of writing that in there, we're gonna have it because it's gonna be an object, a big object. Parcel tongue. I don't know what that is. All right, so there are a few things that we could pass in here. For now, what's important is this needs a secret. There needs something that only we know about. Okay, that's our secret right there. By default, Express session is going to generate a cookie on our client, on our browser. The cookie name that is gonna generate is connect.sid. But we're gonna give it a different name. I always call it monkey. And the idea is that we don't want people to know that we're using Express session, just because if there's a vulnerability, the default is gonna be connect.sid. So session ID for the connection. We don't want that. We want to change the name so that to something weird that nobody knows that this is session information. Not that it's gonna protect you a lot, but it's something you can do a little bit. Every little bit counts. Also, we're gonna say, I don't want this to be accessed from JavaScript. So HTTP only, we're gonna turn that to true. The idea is JavaScript can't access this. This is what that says. Only HTTP only is the browser is going to do it automatically. You can't read it from JavaScript. You don't want that. You don't want anybody manipulating your cookies from JavaScript. And then resave. Let's make this false. And save on initialize. False. We have to think hard now before we go ahead and set cookies in browsers, because I think it's prohibited now. You have to kind of show something. So don't do that by default. Okay. All right. So that's the basics of it, but we're still missing information about the cookie. So let's talk about the cookie now. A cookie is a key value store where you could stick information up to like 4K, I think, is the max size that you can have on a cookie. Normally, what you have is as little information as you can get by that will let the server know that the user is authenticated on who the user is. So you do things like the user ID. If you want to provide or handle your roles through the cookie, not advised, but you could maybe save the role of the user in there in the cookie, and it's fine. But don't do a lot. Okay. One option that you can set is, I could restrict this so that the cookie is only saved when the connection is secure, meaning HTTPS over HTTPS, right? Not over HTTP. That's not what we want in this case, because we're doing it over HTTP for testing, but in production, you will change that. You will change that secure to be true. You don't want people, you don't want anybody saving cookies on the browser over an unsecured connection, because we don't know what's out there, right? And of course, you don't want to have that be eternal. You want this to, and this is milliseconds, so you could say that's 1 second, and then you could say, I don't know, that's 1 minute. Maybe let's make this 1 minute. So a milliseconds, so that's a second, 60 seconds, 1 minute. And then later we could change this to more minutes. And of course you could go 60, 24, and make it a day or so. Depending on the security of your site, you will decide when this cookie is going to expire. Have you been in an application and then all of a sudden you can see a message that says, hey, your session has expired. You have to re-log in to get access to. This is what happens. Your cookie expires after a certain amount of time of inactivity, of you going back and forward. It gets refreshed every time you do something on the application, and they keep it refreshed. But if you don't do anything, the cookie will just go bad and moldy, and you can't use it anymore. We're almost there. So the only things that we've done is we brought in this library. We installed it using yarn add, because I know that sometimes it's missed. And they ask me, how do you get that there? Yeah, that's how we got it. We installed it with yarn add express hashing. Then we brought it in here. and we created this configuration object where we came up with a name, with a secret. We named it HTTP. This is the idea behind those. You could start there with this configuration, then you could read the rest on their website. They have a lot of other options that you could set. You see right here. See the options there. Walk you through what they mean. I'm just giving you here a set of sensible options you can start with. So some of the options are information about the cookie, right? Is it going to be HTTP only? Is it going to be secure? Is it going to have a max age? What is the path that we're going to accept there? The domain of the cookie, when it expires, is it HTTP only? What do those means? So the game side is that no same side? There you go. So you cannot go across domains by default. So if you go from your React application on 3000 and then you go to 3300 on the server, by default it's not going to go across domains, and you run into that problem. But you have ways around that. There are others there, so go have fun and enjoy those. For now, we can start here. Why are there periods separating the words in the, because I chose to have them there. Just trying to make this secure. You know, just some weird characters in there. Yeah, this is just a string, and it's not going to be in your application. You never say that there. That's going to, as we go into the deployment portions, you'll see that you bring this from someone else. It's not going to be on your app. It's not going to be pushed to GitHub at all. So this is just for demo purposes. If anybody gets a hold of that, they can. The cookies are not hashed, okay? The cookies are encrypted, because when you create them, you encrypt them, but when the new request comes in, the server needs to be able to decrypt it and read the information in there. So if anybody gets a hold of that, they can grab any cookie from your site and decrypt it if they know what the secret is. So we need to keep that secret. Right, so we use it as a middleware, and now this should give us, at least we're going to have that session object now that we didn't have before. Let's cut that out again, save it, make sure that we haven't made any typos or no libraries are missing. Apparently there are no errors. We could go now, do a send. See, we removed the rec.session that we had there before, the check. But still, we get the not authorized. That means that there is a session. Now, it was defined, it's only empty. There's no username on that session, but there is a session, right? So we're getting somewhere. We already have a session. Now, the next step is we need to add that username in here whenever we log in, to let now this user's endpoint find it so that it's there. So we're going to go into the login, and somewhere in here, once we have established that the user is logged in successfully, this is where we're going to add that stuff to the request. So in here, we're going to say request.username. It's going to be equal to the user.username. Now, we're looking for this on the session, right? So here I'm placing that on the username directly. Should that work? I want to see a big no, Luis. Right. So we're going to say save this on the session. Okay. So rec.session, I want to put a username inside of the session. Remember, session is like a storage that the server is going to keep, in this case in memory by default. It's going to keep it in memory, and it's going to be there until that cookie expires, right? But the session itself is going to be there, the information that we place on that object, on that session object. So I just place the username inside the session object. So when someone logs in, since the session is going to stay as long as the server is alive, a user can now come back and do another request, and as long as the server is alive, since this is a memory, that username is going to be on the session. Okay? So on login, any information that we want stored on the session, we just add it to that rec.session object. And this rec.session object is created by the Express Session library. So let's close this register. So the Express Session library, as we configure that, is gonna put, because this is middleware that happens before any other endpoints, it's gonna take that and put an object there that we can use, and it's gonna keep it alive in memory. And now, at any point after you wire up that middleware, you have access to this session object to save information in there. We do it when we log in, right? When we log in, we save the username on the session. So we know that the username is there. Let's try it out. If we go to the users, we have no access. Let's try logging in. We're going to log in with Jonathan. Jonathan is logged in. Then we go back to users, and ta-da! You can see that we are logged in. Now, if we give it a minute, though, remember that we said that cookie is going to be good for a minute. Where's that cookie? Well, turns out you could see it right here. If you go look at the cookie, remember the name that I gave it? It's called monkey. This is the cookie. And that means also that if I take that cookie, if I click on cookies here, and I remove monkey, removed it, it's not there anymore, even though this doesn't refresh, but it's not there. Trust me, I removed the cookie, it's not there. So if we do that, and we go back again, no cookie for you first, and also we should have no, where's my body? Where's my body? Oh, here it is. Not authorized, because I removed the cookie. The cookie is not there. So if we want to see it again, we have to again go and get a new cookie. Go back and look at the cookies. Yeah, cookie's there. And now we're logged in for about a minute, right? For about a minute. So questions, and then we're going to come back in about a minute to untest again. Questions about this? So go do the first step where you install the Express Session library, create a configuration object, and use it. And then go and see in one of your endpoints, maybe the user's endpoint, check to see if the session is there. Or maybe console log it as you hit the user's endpoint to make sure that nothing has broken and that the session is actually there. And then do your check. Now, only that, instead of, when you log in, of course, you're going to save the username in there. But instead of doing the check in here in the user's endpoint, I want you to do this on a middleware that you can use locally here. So you want to have a piece of middleware, check, authenticate or something. Give it a name. I call it protected, saying that this is a protected route. So your job is going to be to create a protected piece of middleware. So instead of having this check here, you're going to check in that middleware instead. That's the exercise for you. It's a hard one. It's not easy. Hopefully doable, though. Oh, no. I restarted the server. I think I killed the session. Let me see. Oh, yeah. I killed the session. Let me log in again. It's the problem with having sessions in memory, right? That every time you restart the server, it dies. Session is gone. It's wiped. So your job first is to configure Express Session. Then in any of the endpoints that you hit, could be on the user's endpoint, just do a console log of, Write that session to make sure that it's configured. Let's do that first. Those that are still already finished having your session configuration, go into your login, and after the user is logged in, right before you answer, you send the response, save that username as part of the session this way. And go ahead and work on a piece of middleware. Call it anything you want that we're going to use locally here. And this will be the answer for Michael. This is why I haven't answered yet. because he asked, how does it work? How does this work with endpoint routes? You're going to use, well, right now we're using it on a route. So this is used on an endpoint. We're checking for that. Okay. But the way that we restrict routes normally is by having a piece of middleware that checks for that. And then we use that middleware on any endpoint that needs to be restricted. So you will create a piece of middleware that is going to check that we do have this username as part of the session before giving access to that endpoint. This is a little practice on middleware, just so you don't forget. So back to the configuration object. The login route, the only thing that we have on the login route. Oh, let me see if I can make them both available on the screen at the same time. Because that way you could, if you're still working on the Express session, you see that. But if you want to see the login, it's right here on the right. So the line that we added is this right here, this line. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, this one. Yeah, on the login. So to test it, what you really want to do is, well, you go to, I don't know, to the user's endpoint. In here, you do something like console.log, right, that session, and see if you get an object. Doing that should console log an empty object if you have nothing on the sessions yet. And then after you add this line to the login, when you log in and then go to the users, you should see an object there that has the username. And if you're done with this part, continue working and go build that middleware. That would be the second poll is for the custom middleware that you're going to build to restrict access to the users, checking that the username is on the session. They're not authorized. Since I'm checking for the session, if I don't find it, I assume that they're not logged in, so I have an else. Yeah, it could be Jason. Let me just pass an object here. The server hasn't restarted, but if I go and try to hit the endpoint now, it's not authorized because the cookie expired. Cookie's dead. Now I'm going to save and restart it. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go and create that piece of middleware. So the way that we're gonna use it at the end is any endpoint that we need to protect, we're just gonna have something here, restricted, protected, needs authentication, authorized, call it anything you want. It's gonna be a piece of middleware that I'm gonna use locally here. So I'm gonna call it protected. This is a protected endpoint, and I need that middleware now to be assembled and used in any endpoint that needs to be restricted to logged in users only. So let's go build it. Of course, we're building everything again. I need to emphasize this. We're building everything on the same file. Doesn't mean that this is how you're gonna do things, okay? It's just because it's easier to just scroll on that up and down and see it. Actually, let me write it down here close to where we're gonna be using it. It's gonna be a function called protected. And then we're gonna do that check, right? That check should be down here. And I say, hey, do I have that session? That's my check right there. So now I can get rid of this and say only if the device is logged in, and we are controlling that. We don't care. We don't have to check for logging anymore here because the concern of this endpoint is returning the list of users. So we're back to where we should be. The concern of checking that the user is logged in is going to be handled by the protected middleware, for this middleware right here. So what happens if they're logged in? What is it that we want to do when the user is logged in? If they're not, we're just going to shortcut the response and just send the message right there. What should I do here when the user is logged in when we are inside a piece of middleware? We want to call next. That's correct. And that should be it. That should work exactly the same as it was, unless I broke something else. So if we go and do login, well, if we go and check the users, they should have no access to anything. Not authorized. Go into the login. Now we're logged in. We go back, and the middleware kicks in and says, yep, you have access, and everything works fine for a minute, because the cookie is only a minute long. That's the duration. No cookie for you. Yeah, this is an interesting error that I used to get a lot when I was learning to use Node. Oh man, it's so annoying. If any of you runs into this, I used to get that a lot, so many times. I was like, I don't understand. I'm like I would eventually fix it, but I don't understand what's going on. Is that if at any point in here you do, let's say that I do something, like in this case, right? I'm saying res.json, so I'm kind of returning thing, or I think I am, but not necessarily. If down there, it turns out that you have another res and you're not actually ending the response here, like if there was another res here, like res dot, send foo down here, you would get an error. It's because it goes through all this code, right? It does this, and then your promise resolves, and then you try to do this again. You're trying to send something, and it's like, no, you can't do that. You already send it. You can't set that header because you're already done. So this is why you see as a defensive measure, whenever you, let me see if I have, like in this example, right? I have a rest status here and then another rest status here. As a defensive measure, I always have an else. The alternative to having an else should be to either, and you'll see that a lot in code from people, they do a return here, or you could just do a return here and return that. That return and that return, they do the same thing. They finish the execution of this function. So that's another way of solving this. I tend to, instead of having to remember to have those returns in there, I just do an else because it's semantically, it makes more sense to me semantically. I want to say, I do this if this is true, else I do this other thing. And now you don't have that problem with unhandled headers. So yeah, can't set headers after they're sent. This oh man, so many hours of my life suffering from this error. All right, so that's the middleware. Do your check and call next. If not, you're not authorized. Now we could use this middleware on any endpoint that we have in here. Now what happens on register though? If a user register, they're not gonna have a session. So what do we wanna do? Well, the same thing that we did up here. Once we know that they registered, let's log them in. I have visited websites where I, register, and then it sends me back to a screen where I have to log in again. I was like, why didn't I just register with you? Why am I not already logged in? So when a user registers, log them in, right? If you know that they're good, they got in here and your credentials are fine and you already registered the user, before you send that thing, stick it in there. Because that way, if they go and visit another portion of your website, if you do like a redirect instead of, oh, did I? Oh, okay, here it is. So if you send that back to the client and the client needs to go somewhere else to get some other data, they can go and get it without having to log in the user again because the client is already logged in. So the question is, where do cookies live in the browser? And the cookies live in the browser. Nobody asked that question, but I was hoping I was going to get the question answered. There's an application tab in here. And inside that application tab, you have different ways of storing data on the browser. One of those happens to be cookies. There's local storage, which we're going to use for tokens, session storage, a database, two different competing formats for SQL databases on the browser, and then you have the cookie right here. From NPM, this is all the cookies that we get. From GitHub, we go to the application, go into the cookies, open this up, GitHub, look at all the this is the cookie that we have, right? And inside the cookies for GitHub, there's all the different cookies that we have. This is the name, and there's a value, name and value. Oh, look at that. The .com user is me. So he knows my username. They're saving it. Only then, instead of calling the username or anything else, they call it .com user. TZ, time zone, America, Denver. And I guess there's more there. Let's see. This is where GitHub thinks I am. In America, Denver. Okay. Interesting. This is information that they track, right? And on the next request, those cookies are going to be sent by the browser automatically to GitHub. So they don't have to ask me who my user is. They already know. It's part of a cookie in there. Octo. Looks like the version of GitHub that I used to log in. I don't know what that is. Session. Ah, look at this is my session information. Let's go pick inside that. Whoa, that's a long session. Yeah. Cool. And of course, if we go look at our cookies though, look at that. That's a long session information too. So it's not surprising. What am I really though? I'm in Utah, Provo, Utah. So lucky to end up here. Really good for families. Family friendly city. Quiet. Besides, we got Google Fiber. So what's better than that? Oh, Bountiful. Excellent. Never visited. I don't even know what it is. Maybe north of me. Maybe northeast. North of Salt Lake City. Yeah, definitely north. All right. Anyways, back to code. Nice, Brock. You should come meet the gang. We have lunch on Fridays here in Utah, somewhere around south of Salt Lake City, Lehigh, around there. All right. How are we feeling with sessions going into a 5-minute break? Just in case, right? Just in case, I'm going to drop the content of this file on Slack. If you want to have it for comparisons, maybe drop it on a separate file to use it as a reference. And if you're still having some errors, maybe you could drop it in there, and just replace save your code and then rename this. So let's go for a 5-minute break and then continue talking about authentication. Like, how do I do a logout, Luis? I don't know how to do a logout. I'll show you in 5 minutes. So does compare hash the password all the time before it does the comparison? Yes, it does. Because it cannot compare a plain text with a hash because they're not going to match. So what it does is it hashes it again and then compares the two hashes. Yep. So the register endpoint makes it so the user is created but returns a blank object. Okay, so that is a lot of code in there. I see it better here. That on Slack. So let's see. Hey, a lot of comments. Nice. I like it. So credentials, the hashing, credentials, password. Making it 14. This is gonna take a while. Okay. Yeah, you're right, because we're doing this. My fault. Because we don't have the user here. That's a bug. That's a bug on our implementation. So the sample code is broken. Yeah, the reason is we don't really have a user now that I look at it here. We need to go and get that user if we want the username, or we could pass in the username we have in the credentials. Let's fix it in mind too. Copy and paste. Haha. So the login works because we have the user, but on the register we don't. So the copy and paste killed us there. Credentials, that username. That should fix it. Good job finding that one. Oh, thank you, Michael. Good job. All right. So how do we log out? Oof, that's going to be a hard one. Because now we need to tell the server, hey, you know, any cookies that you have out there, you have to go and call those browsers and tell them to destroy that cookie. So, yeah. Any idea how one can do a logout? How would you go about doing that? First, we need the endpoint. Let's go and create the endpoint, see if we can figure this stuff out. It's going to be hard. So we'll log out in here somewhere. Let's say server that. This could be a get. It doesn't have to be a post because we're not going to really send anything to the server. So I was just going to do logout. Stop it. Don't follow along. Don't fall to the temptation. I'm typing what I'm typing. Wait. Exercise willpower. Do I have a session? If I do, I'll take that session and I'm going to destroy it. This gets an error callback. So it's a callback with error first, and we could check for that. We could say if I have an error, I don't know if we care, but we could check for that, right? We could probably send a message here, say, press that, I don't know, send, you can't leave. It's like the Hotel California. Remember that song? You can check out, but you can never leave. It's kind of creepy. And this, yeah, goodbye. That's it. The only code is actually you go into the rec that session. Well, you check first, so you know, run into an error, and then you call destroy. And that would be the logout. Or we could do just a simple get there, since we're not sending any information. So go and log in. Excellent. We do have our users, so we're logged in. Let's go and duplicate this. Call it logout. I said get to log out. Why are you saying post? There you go. Goodbye. I had as a post. And now, if we go back to the users, oh, I copied the wrong thing. This is the one. Log out, log in, log out. Let's delete this. Okay. So we go back to the users. We're logged down. All right. Log in. Have users. Log out. Goodbye. No users. So that's it. That's the logout. And that completes the flow. The basics of doing authentication using sessions and cookies. That is a good guitar solo for sure. Warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. They're poets. Anyways, here's the code for the logout. Go and implement it and give it a try and let me know how that goes. Good one, Joseph. Now that I think about it, I didn't realize it, but maybe he was either driving a convertible, running in a horse, or maybe a motorcycle or a bike. Because isn't it dark desert highway, cool wind in his hair? So no windshield. Oh no, I got out of the questions thread. Here it is. Found it. How can you test the error when you're trying to log out? I have no idea. I don't know why you would get an error there either. I'm gonna try this. Let me see. Let me see if this works. Let's see if that fires it. Nope, I did not fire it. I have no idea. I guess it would probably break maybe once you move to using an external session store, because so far we have been working only on memory. So in memory is less likely to break. But when we use an external store for your sessions, like a database, for instance, then probably it might fail there. I'm not sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, if you're getting whatever message you're sending on the success, which is goodbye in my case, you're good to go. That means that you're logged out. But then you can always, what I did, you notice what I did, right? I logged out and then I go and check that I don't have access to the users anymore. Because the point is not logging out. The point is, can I see the restricted endpoint or not? You might see the cookie, but can you access the users though? No. Yeah, that's fine. Because remember, the cookie, that's a good question. So the question is, logout works, like he cannot see the users, but he still have a cookie there. Yeah, because in the case of sessions, who's in control of the session? Who's saving that session? The server is, okay? So the cookie is just the medium that the server uses to send information about the session to the client. And then the browser will automatically send that cookie on every request. But remember, when the cookie comes into the server is going to validate that cookie and say, hey, it expired or is no longer good for any reason. And one of those reasons is because when you call destroy, it's going to invalidate that cookie. So by just having the cookie doesn't mean that you're going to get access. The server still has the control of the session itself. The cookie is just a medium to store information about that session. Yeah, that's a really good question. What can we store in the cookie? Well, as long as it fits in the 4K, you could add more information. You could add more things. Like if you log in and we're only saving now, the username, but we could place a whole user object, anything that we remember though, that's going to go to the client. So don't have anything that you send to the client don't have sensitive information ever. But things like the username is fine, right? Because we need a way to identify. It would be better if instead of the username, we had the user ID. So in this case would be, I don't know, maybe call it ID or user ID. And instead of passing that, passing the ID for the user. Now, in order to do that on the register, we need to, instead of passing, see, we have this ID that we get back. So instead of passing the credentials, the username, then we would pass the user, not the user, but the ID that we got back. This ID. The point of this conversation is it doesn't have to be the username. It doesn't have to be any specific information. It's just something that is going to let you, that you can check for to do more. This is only authentication though, right? Now, instead of checking for the username, I will need to check for the user ID. So in here, don't change that. I'm just having a conversation with you. So don't have to change it. Keep it as a username, is fine. But this is a malleable object. You decide what you want to store there and what you check for. So a problem that we have with this is the following. I'm going to go in there, do a login. We're logged in. I could go into the users, and I could see the user. Now I'm going to go back to the server, open up the terminal, and stop the server. Go back. Of course, the server is not there, right? It's not there. I'm going to restart the server again. The server is there, but you're not authorized. But it's just logged in, and it hasn't been a minute. Even if we take this session cookie, the session config, instead of give it a minute, let's give it, I don't know, 10 minutes. We still have the same problem, okay? And the reason for that is that we have the session stored in memory. So what other alternatives to storing sessions in memory do we have? Well, you have what is called a memory cache. You have also the possibility of doing it on a database. They all have their pros and cons, right? Storing sessions in memory, it's wiped every time the server restarts. But it's also very, very fast. It's very convenient. You don't have to do anything other than configure the library, and that's it. By default, it's going to use memory. It's really good for development because it's really, really simple, right? But then what about the other options like memory cache and on databases? Well, if you use memory cache, definitely as far as I know, as of right now, this is the preferred way of storing sessions. There are products, there are services or online and servers that you could run in your own premise, in your data centers, that were built specifically to store key value pairs. And since the session is only a key value pair, any of those key value pair products is good enough for this. The most common ones are Redis, it's really, really useful. Like probably most of the production applications out there use something like Redis or Memcache. Memcached, there it is. Oh, look, cloud. I guess Google has one of those. But the point is, hey, where's my, okay, let's click this. Why is that not loading? Yeah, Memcache. I don't think it's the same though. Anyways, so there is a product called Memcache and there is a product called Redis, and they are used a lot in production when it comes to storing session information. So that's something that you want to look at when you open your own company. That's one of the alternatives, right? The other one is, and of course they have quick lookups. They're decoupled from the API server. That means that you can have as many API servers as you want, and they can all share the same set of, Redis servers or key value store servers. Oh, how do we have activity refresh the 1 minute max age? I don't know. I haven't to do that. Generally, I have cookies that expire longer, but then again, I haven't really worked with building authentication systems from the ground up like this. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. Really, don't have an answer. I could research, see how they do it. I wish I had all the answers. So does that mean that we shouldn't spin our own solution? Of course, that means that. I've been saying that from the get-go. Don't write your own authentication system ever. If you can, I mean, it's good for the demos and showing that you can actually do it, but this is something that you do only if you have to, if you're forced to, and you can really justify using a third-party service. It's going to be really rare that you find like modern applications that have a in-house authentication system built for them only. They normally are going to have things like OAuth 2 using a third-party provider. So yeah, but still, you get the understanding of how things work, because that takes away the magic. And now you're ready to build something for your project week. So yeah, the way that it's set up, we're just restricting that you cannot get access to the users, but once you get access to, once you're logged in, that's all we're checking. You get access to see the users. That's the whole point, right? Because we're talking about authentication, not authorization. We haven't talked about authorization at all. And you remember yesterday we said there's a difference between the two, and this week is about authentication, not authorization. Authorization is going to be different depending on each company is going to have a way of doing it. A common way of doing it is role-based, where the users get assigned a role or a collection of roles, and then you check for those. We normally on Thursday, we kind of take a quick peek at that, but this is not something that is a prescription. So like authentication using sessions or tokens is kind of the main way that is done. But then when it comes to authorization, that changes so much. So we don't really have like a prescribed solution for that. When working with tokens, which is what I've worked with, Travis, you normally have two types of tokens. One is called an access token, and the access token is similar to the cookie. It's telling about information about you, and sometimes, depending on the company, you might decide to store information about the rights that you have, like what can you do in the system. And this could be as simple as having the role that you have, like maybe you're an admin, maybe you're on sales or finance. And then you have another type of token, and then those access tokens, they are short-lived. Like depending on the institution, it may be every 10 minutes. So what happens is when you send that token, the same way that you send the cookie, the application on the back end has to do this all the time, right? It checks and they say, oh, this token has expired, and it's going to send you an error. And then the client sees that and says, okay, so the token has expired. But then you have a different kind of token that is called a refresh token. And the idea here is that you're trusting the access token to have information that is true. So if in the access token I say that you are an admin, okay, when when a request comes into the server and I see that admin role in there, I'm going to trust it without checking the database. And I could just answer right away and say, oh, yeah, it's an admin, so I'm going to give him access to whatever the admin can see. But since it is short-lived, every 10 minutes, that token is going to expire. So minute 11, you show up with that token, and I say, I don't trust this. It's expired, so I'm going to send you an error. So the client has a different token, and that's the refresh token, and that may last maybe 24 hours. So what the client says is, oh, this one expired? Oh, let me send you the refresh token then. So the server receives that second request, and this is chatty, but it's for security reasons, and it happens really, really fast. You really don't notice it. So when the server now gets the refresh token, it says, okay, this is still valid. I can now take that user ID that I see on the token and check the database to see whether they still have access as an admin or not. So basically what this does is now the server is going to go to the database and assemble a brand new access token that is going to last another 10 minutes. Or half an hour or 1 hour, depending on the company, right? And then it creates a brand new access token and sends it back to the client and say, hey, yeah, you have access to the resource that you wanted. And by the way, here's your new access token for the next request. But now we're getting way ahead of what we're supposed to be covering here. Yeah. So Vera says the Connect Session Connects is the library that we're going to probably use to work with databases. Okay. Right. So Travis is getting it. All right. So another way is storing session data in a database. It's got pros and cons. They always have pros and cons, drawbacks that you take, right? So if the key value store is going to be really, really fast to do those checks, storing session data in a database is going to be similar to the prior, only that it's going to be slower. Databases are slower than key value stores because key value stores are optimized for things like this. And in some cases, unless the library is doing it, you have to manage the old sessions manually. Products like Redis and Memcache, they already have built-in mechanics to check for expiration on the sessions, and they will clean up after themselves. It's like memory, like garbage collection on your JavaScript engine. So it will check every once in a while, hey, let me clean up and remove any sessions that are already expired. There's no reason to keep them around, right? So those products have all of that. In the database, the library is going to have to do that manually. It doesn't happen at the server level. Your library actually is going to do that. And then we saw that we have some express session compatible stores here. Don't go. Stay there. Stop it. Okay. So we have this here, and we found one yesterday for Connects. Let's go and use that one. So I just said Connects in here. Here we go. So Connect Session Connects, that's the one that we're going to use. And normally what happens is those libraries, they need to communicate with your session store somehow. So whatever library you're using, like if you're doing Mongo, whatever it is, Memcache based, right? Whatever you're using, you need to go and read the documentation because it's going to be different. They follow a similar pattern, but the options and all that is going to be different. In the case of this one, though, we know that we need to install it. So I'm going to install it here. You can go ahead and install it together with me. It's called Connect Session Connects. So Connect Session Connects. No, you're not. I'm going to add that to your project. Just making sure that the name is correct. And yep, that's working. All right, so once that's on the project, it's required up here. And this has to happen for this particular library right after, I think all the libraries do the same thing. It's got to happen after you have the session because you need to connect them somehow. And the way that you connect them is you pass the session that you pass this library to the next library, to the database connection library. So let's call this Connects. So you require Connect Session Connects, and this is going to return a function, and then using curry, you just pass the session into that. I haven't taken the time to see why all of their examples they use this name. So just to keep it safe, we're using the same name they have in their examples. Okay. Connect session store like that. I have a pretty good idea why it's uppercase, because it's a constructor function when you get back. So when you require, you get a function, you execute that function, passing the session that you're using, whatever session pack and middleware you use. And then when you get back, it's a constructor function that you can new up. So normally when you have constructor functions, you treat them as a class. So you use uppercase to denote that this is a constructor function, and you have to new it up. Now, this package now knows about the session, but the session needs to know that it's not going to store information in memory anymore, that it wants to use connects instead, the database, right? Connect to the database through connects. So here we're going to add to the session configuration another key called store. And this is where we configure for our express session package, we're going to configure how is it that the server is going to persist the session information. And here we new up that connect session store here, and we pass it, again, an object to configure it. And it's got some things, it's going to have some default values, but it's a good idea for you to control those, some of those. So for instance, you have an access to select the table name. Yeah, all lowercase, I know, it's weird. But that's how they have it. So the table name, and let's call it sessions, so that you know that those are the sessions as soon as you see it on your database. The SID, the session ID field name, you could give it a value there. Since this is designed to work at connects, it's going to ask you, give me an instance of connects that is already configured to access your database. We happen to have this here. We call it DB. So we're going to call this, we're going to pass that a reference. It's not going to be a string. It's going to be a reference to our, configure connects instance. And then there are others, like for instance, do we want to let this package create the sessions table if it doesn't exist? So they have a create table. You can say true because we don't have that sessions table. So the first time it runs, it's going to say, hey, there's no sessions table. Let's call this sessions in plural. So it's going to create a table for us. And then the other one is, I know that sessions are going to expire. How long do we need to wait before the package is going to do a check on the database and say, hey, tell me what sessions have expired, and just delete those, okay? So there's a clear interval, and yeah, I don't know why this one is cap and case, but it's just the way that the library is created. So follow that. Clear interval, and then it's of course milliseconds, so that would be 1 second by, I don't know, a minute, an hour. So let's say that every hour I want my library, my server, to go and check and delete all sessions from the database, to do a cleanup every hour or so. The active sessions are going to be saved. This is only the expired sessions, okay? So it's fine. We could do it every hour or so. So just by doing this, you remember that when we stopped the server, we logged in, we stopped the server, and then we restarted the server, and we try to hit the endpoint, and even though we had just logged in seconds ago, the user appeared to be logged out. So let's try this out. Okay, now that we have this, make sure that we haven't broken anything. Server is running. Let's go back. I'm gonna do a login. All right, so Jonathan is logged in. He can see the users. Let's go and stop the server. Server is not running. Of course it's not, okay? So let's go and restore the server again. And what happened before is that I had no access to the users anymore because the memory got wiped out on the server. What happens now, though, is that it's going to do a search on the database. And since the database is persistent, now we still logged in. And we're going to remain logged in for as long as the cookie is valid, or we hit log out. We can manually log out. But this is going to remain logged in because we still have that valid cookie there. Now, if we log out, go back to the users. Excellent. You're not authorized now. Yes. So does the interval still takes into account when the server is down? Yeah, because what happens is that the cookie gets an expiration date. So what the server is going to do is it's going to say, hey, delete every session where the expiration date is prior to this moment. It's a value that you have there. So it doesn't matter whether the server is running or not. Yeah. Good question. You guys, I like thinking of the important stuff. Very nice. So that's it, right? That's just with this package. If you're using Mongo or a Memcache or Redis, you're going to use one of the other packages, but they kind of follow this pattern where you bring in the library after the session, you pass the session to the library, and then you come into the Express session and configure the store with whatever options that particular library or NPM modular is going to ask for. Pretty straightforward. Give it a try. We have time. We have about 12 minutes, so let's give it a try to see if you can get it to work. Moving this up here so that you see both in screen. You see the configuration for the package and also what we did up here with the library. So will we touch on storing session data in one route handler and reading? We have done that already, right? So the question is, can we see how you store data on one route handler and then retrieve that data on another? We have done that. Remember that originally we did not have this protected middleware. What we did it was that we took on the login route, we store the user here, and then we checked for that user on the users. We were checking that, right? That's a different route handler altogether. So we already did it. Anything that you place on that session after you log in is going to be available on any of the routes that come after. And of course, you're going to have your authentication. If you want to have something global, you could do it globally and have it at the top. But in this case, we did it through the protected middleware, but you can actually read information about the session here like you did originally. There's no magic there. Let me prove it to you. I'm going to do this. Correct that session. Thank you, Visual Studio Code. That was awesome. Session. In your case, that would be the username. And then as the second argument to this object, I'm going to pass the users. So the stuff that I had in protected, or the stuff that I added here on the login, after I log in, I can access that anywhere now, like the session, through the session. That's an example. If that piece of code that you saw on Training Kit, you have to read the whole code because it's an example of showing you the difference between having a session and not having it. It will make more sense once you read it. It's an example of us going through the exercise of, hey, you have this thing where you want to save information on the server across requests, and you can't do it unless you have a session. So that's what that is illustrating there. Yeah. We did it here, only that we using login and users instead of using two arbitrary endpoints like the example. Oh, let me show the configuration again. Memory cache requires an external server. We don't have that. So we don't see examples of that. We only see it in memory and on the database. If you want to use something like Redis, you need a Redis server running somewhere. So they all behave the same. It's just configuration that is going to be different for them. So the question was that example stored in session in data in memory cached? Nope. It was just in regular memory on the server, like RAM. This one right here. This is the package. Connect session connects. There may be a typo there somewhere in there, maybe. That's what I used. Besides this line, installing the packages on this line, the only thing that we added was this store to the configuration. Everything else remained the same. Anything you need, Patrick, that is not on screen? Oh, cool. So what do we call Connect Session Store? I understand what it's doing, but I don't know what to call it. I don't know what it's called. It's a Session Store package for Connects. Okay. Let's call it this. It's a Session Store adapter. So we assume that we have a session, some kind of store somewhere, and we have sessions, and we want to store them, and we need an adapter for that. I don't know. That's the name, though. Let's see where we are. I don't think the exercise, the project for this afternoon is asking for you to configure storing the session information in a database, but you can go ahead and do that. It's okay. But you don't have to though. If it works in memory, it's fine. All right, do you have any more questions? If not, it's time for you to go have lunch, take a break, take a quick look at this again, go through the whole code and make sure that you understand the basics of this, and then go and implement it on your project. Once you're done with that, please go ahead and take a quick read at the next on Training Kit. So the next one on Training Kit would be JSON Web Tokens. I'm really interested on you taking a quick look at, let me point you to that. So go in here, using JSON Web Tokens. And there are a couple of links here. The anatomy of a JSON Web Tokens, JSON Web Tokens versus sessions and cookies, right? And then you have some video, and you can watch that if you want to. We're gonna go to the same thing here in lecture tomorrow. But at least take a quick look at this so that you have an idea of what a JSON Web Tokens look like. And go into, there's another link here to jot.io. This side, right? This link is gonna take you into jot.io. Even though this is explained in the video, it's good if you go and take a quick look whenever this decides to load. There you go. Why? Because they have an introduction article here. If you click on that introduction article, it's going to give you a little more detail that we cover in class about what JSON Web Tokens are and how they work. So you could go take a quick read. It's not long, and it's pretty easy to follow. So go take a quick look at that, as we're going to just go over this briefly, but they explain this a little better. And they, of course, they do it in the context of using an authorization server, but it's cool because now you have a better idea of how using an external tool works. So it's a short article, so please go take a quick look at that after you're done with the project today. So this is on this link right here. Visit this site to see the debugger right after these examples. And then the anatomy of a JSON Web Token is another good explanation of how they work and what they are. Right? So take a quick look at this so that you come in tomorrow with a better idea of what's going on. Okay? These articles are specifically selected because they're simple to follow, and they don't go way too deep into things about security that we don't need to know about to be able to use this technology. So Patrick is like, it's giving me errors. Never mind, I got it. Cool. All right, so see you tomorrow. Have fun. Please take a break. Don't continue working right away. Take a break, have lunch, and then come back later and tackle that project and read those articles. And I'll see you tomorrow.